record on this computer. So, welcome to this recording of the Dr. Tom Show. I'm really excited today to have the dad coach with me, who is James Boardman. And I have been following you, James, for a bit of time now. And what really caught my attention was your passion and your enthusiasm to help a very specific group of people with a very clear message. And I think it comes from your past and what you've done with the Royal Marines, what you've done with physical training. And to be able to pull that out of an institution and give it to individuals in their lives, I think is just, it's special, it's remarkable.
Thank you.
And it's certainly got my attention. So I'd just like to start with, if you could give us a brief background on how you got from obviously being within the Royal Marines to coming full circle and into coaching.
Yeah.
It's quite a big difference. And I'd love to hear your story about how you got there.
Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. So I left the Royal Marines in 2011. And the reason I left was because I didn't want to be a weekend dad anymore. So the initial reason I left was that I needed to come home and be present for my children, who were quite young at the time. Having come out, things didn't go quite as well as I wanted them to. The transition from a military life, and when I talk about the military, it's like my passion. It was my love. You think about the girl that you ever had in your life that you just literally loved and craved. You know, that was my job. And that's how much I loved my job and my role. And leaving it behind was a very tough job. And then coming into civilian street was I didn't expect it to be hard, but the transition was very difficult. I really lost focus on who I was as an individual. I lost structure. I lost confidence. You know, I would say it was a trauma in my life. For sure, I was coming out with cold sores. I was putting on weight. I was drinking. I was being, just aggressive in general. I didn't really know where I was going, and it cost me my marriage. And I got to a very, very, very low point where I even thought about, just ending it all. And I really grasped why I had left the Royal Marines on this one particular evening and decided to go for a training run. And I had, bearing in mind, I hadn't done any training for about a year. I went from being a physical training instructor in the Marines to being a fat lad and just very unhappy, in life. And I just thought, I'm going to just go for a run. And it was only intended to be like a around the block sort of thing, just to clear the black cloud around my head. I ended up running for 3 hours. And needless to say, I was very sore the next day. But those 3 hours really lifted a black cloud that had been following me since I'd left. And suddenly all of these emotions just come flooding to me. I almost had a 3-day crying fit where I was just detoxing my body. A lot of the realization about where I was, and self-awareness is such a powerful feeling and emotion that we can have. And just by doing that run, I realized that there was more to live for, and that there was purpose in my life. And I just started building myself up. So I created a business, which was a local boot camp. And as that grew, I grew as an individual. I've become very thirsty to learn about coaching, to learn about running a business, to learn about being an individual. And I really discovered a new version of myself, a much better version of myself. So I kind of, I was somebody in the Marines. I was a Royal Marine Commando Sergeant, Sniper, physical training instructor. My purpose was this. I then went through this chapter of my life where I didn't know what my purpose in life was. And then I went through this period of helping people become fit and confident in a local boot camp. And then the boot camp got to a kind of point, and then I was like, you know what? There are a lot of guys out there who are like me, who are in the same position as me. I know they are, and they might not even have gone through military. They might just be in normal life, who don't have any confidence in themselves, who lack identity, who lack purpose, who lack clarity about where they are in their life. So I started a brand new journey, which is the biz coach, and really, I've never looked back. And the last 2 years, I've really concentrated on developing myself. the dad's coach was always a dictation or documenting that journey. So what I was doing a lot of the time was showing people what I was doing, how I was doing it, how I was creating a new version of myself, a better version of myself. And along the way, it was helping people. And that's, you know, the brotherhood formed and my mastermind formed and all those other things kind of formed from it, the podcasts. So really the journey from 2011 to present has really been about going through the lowest point of my life ever to then regaining my life and impotence and purpose and clarification about the direction that I wanted to go. And I display that daily now through social media, which is how you found me.
I think it's a fantastic story, and if I'm hearing you right, it wasn't an easy story to go through, and
no,
for sure it cost you a lot, and sometimes to find who we are costs us a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, we are essentially born into being, you know, the epitome of what our mothers, teachers, fathers, preachers have told us over the years. And to pull through that's brilliant. One of the things you said is, you know, it's the emotional side of things. You had 3 days of crying. I think that's brilliant that you mentioned that, and I think a lot of men don't push into their emotions enough. I like to say depression is the opposite of expression. So if we're not expressing our truest self or our true emotions, it builds up that level of depression.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on how maybe the military suppressed your ability to express your emotions, or maybe how you see men in institutions and businesses not necessarily being able to express their emotions, and maybe any tips or guidance you've got for them on that particular.
Of course, yeah. I think someone always said to me, if you think about a kettle, and if you put it onto boil and it continuously boils, and when it gets to a certain point, it flicks off and it releases all the steam. I think that's very true of a human body. And our body is like a kettle with everything bubbling up and boiling up inside of us. And it never clicks off. And when we don't click it off, we overboil, we burn out, we become overwhelmed, we become frustrated. And we never allow ourselves to let off the steam for the kettle to finish, you know. And I think what I liked your analogy there about the depression, and you know, if we don't get it out, it stays harnessed in us forever, and that's where we become suddenly we fall into this bubble where we don't see anything else. We're just bubbling up all the time, becoming more and more depressed, more and more anxious and overwhelmed. And I'll come on to maybe some reason how we can move on from that. But I'll come back to your question. And I think the military, you know, when you join the Royal Marines, you know, you're joining to potentially go to war and fight. You know, I did a stint in Afghanistan, and, you know, I didn't really experience too much. But it was certainly, you know, being on patrol and being on heightened alert, and the role that I had as a sniper, you know, you're on the line, playing your life on the line when you're over there. So I think that the type of mindset that you have to embrace when you're in the Marines is this hardened mindset, this hardened shell. Now, you know, you can't afford to be soft in Afghanistan or when you're at war. So I think that when I reflect on my military career, I built up this non-emotional persona within myself, and something my ex-wife used to say to me, and we're actually really good friends now. She used to say to me, "You just have no emotion at all." So, you know, sometimes what you see in those films, you know, where the guy goes, and you often see it in films when they come back from war in Iraq, they're in their home, they're not there, they are there, but they're not present. And that's very much how I used to feel. I used to feel non-emotion about things that would be quite upsetting or sad. I would just be like stone cold, calm, and I had no feelings on the matter. And it's quite scary, but, you know, I guess that's what you kind of train for, you know, that's kind of like what you practice. So I was never really very good at expressing my emotions. And I think those 3 days when I just could not stop crying was the kettle finally switching off and allowing everything to come out, realizing the mistakes I had made, realizing that I was nowhere near where I wanted to be in life. It was like detoxicating myself from a life that needed me to be a hardened shell. And I think when I see a lot of guys that I think you were talking about, corporate business institutes, you know, directors, area managers, you know, I work with a lot of those type of guys. And I feel that they are almost so involved in the rat race that they don't take time out of that rat race to see the bigger picture, to see the map. You know, if you looked at your life as a bird's eye view, I was talking about this morning, you can almost map out your life in front of you. Whereas the corporate world and the business world is so intense. Everything is about numbers. Everything is about demands that we don't realize the position we're in. When I was in the military, I never realized I was non-emotional and cold until I stepped out of that role. Business guys, CEOs, directors, people running, entrepreneurs are so involved that they don't realize what they're doing within terms of their minds, i.e. burnout.
What's at stake for those people if they don't realize?
Oh, I think my example is a perfect example, is that they're not probably communicating very well at home. Mm-hmm. And I would say that a lot of marriages and relationships break down because of a lack of communication or empathy towards each other. It's kind of like coming home, cracking out the beer, getting drunk, taking it out on the kids, that type of stress. But there are also health implications such as overweight, high blood pressure, diabetes. You know, eventually it's all going to catch up. And we can talk, you and me can talk about all this. We know this. I mean, I think you and me are very similar in the fact that we are very grounded and we manage our time well and our well-being and our mental well-being. But so many people aren't. And it's going to get to a point where it's too late and they realize that they have made some big errors in their lives.
So what can people do then to be aware of the situation? Because I just flew back from Asia, and when you're so high, you get such perspective. Flying over India and just seeing the vastness of it gives you a realization, but sometimes people can't see that perspective. Yeah. It's nice to know how maybe they could identify it, and maybe just the first thing that they could do to try and break the cycle. How can they just pull themselves out of it?
So it's a really good question, and I think there are a variable of answers, and I think because we have so many vast different personalities out there, that a different answer will reflect a different type of group of individual and the way that individual thinks. I don't think that there is just one answer to this because of the way we all think and the way we all receive information. I think one of the reasons I do what I do is I only ever talk from experience. So I think from talking from experience, it gives people a perception of what can happen. So if we look at the facts, I lost my marriage. Right now I struggle to have a solid relationship with my 14-year-old daughter because of that split, and I will live with regret. Although I'm in an amazing place now, I get married again. I have an amazing relationship with my ex-wife. I love my kids unconditionally. But there are sacrifices. And I think for people to understand that, they have to really understand that people are having heart attacks in their early 40s, 30s through stress. I think you have to understand that work is not the be all and end all, that there is a bigger world out there, shall we say. But I think the key word is self-awareness. Now, in my book, we talk about doing a life audit. And the life audit is really a realization of where you are in 4 different areas. And those areas are in your health, your business, your relationships, and your personal development. And I guess in my head, they cover most of the aspects of life. So when we try and look at our balance, if we split those 4 headings into 4 different quarters and we think about how much attention that we're putting into each one of those boxes, what I think the large majority of guys between sort of 30 and 55 are doing is that most of their effort, stress, overwhelm, burnout, and emotion comes from work. And we don't put enough into health. There's probably nothing in health. Relationships are probably neglected, and personal development probably hasn't been touched since university or college or school. So work, for a lot of people, dictates the way that they live their life. Sure, we've got to work, we've got to earn money, we've got to support and provide, but there is a drastic lack of personal management going on. And one of the reasons I do what I do is I try to make men. So if I said to you, hey, come and do my 6-week program, I'm going to get you nice and fit, I'm going to get you eating a really great food plan, yada, 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 all the bullshit that we see in the industry. How can I expect a guy who can't even not press snooze and get up, who can't manage his morning, who can't manage his work-life balance, to then suddenly come into my program and go, yeah, let's do this 6-week program, I'll get nice and fit. Out of 100 people that would do that 6-week program, I promise you only 5 would still be there at the end. And that's why guys are falling off the wayside after week 2, week 3, week 4, because we're not managing our lives. We're not managing the basics, which is our time, which is our energy levels, which is our priority levels. All these things we're not planning. You know, when we're at college, school, or university, we live off a timetable. Our life is based around that timetable. When we leave that institute and we are in the big wide world, we're just rolling with the punches. So we have no structure.
I think that's really interesting, and I certainly have seen it from my life. And I speak about my father now. He's a brilliant man, emotionally given me so much. But what I see is that, and people of his generation see work as their way to provide for family, provide for relationships.
Yeah.
But they kind of fall short because they're not then investing themselves in it. They think, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to make money, which will then make my family happy and healthy, but never turn it around on them.
Yeah.
And then, we get to that point where it's like, oh, I wish I had looked after my health because now I've got my retirement. And,
yeah.
I'm going to
now you're fucked.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the stark realization of it. It's so prevalent.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you're working with men because it's men that don't see it.
Yeah, it's men that don't see it. And if we're being honest, a lot of that is ego and stubbornness. A lot of guys think they can do it themselves, and it's like, I'll start Monday. And Monday never comes around because there's always an excuse, and it's become it's so easy to quit. It's so easy to quit. When you've got your lads and your mates around you going, mate, what are you doing that for? Come down the pub. You don't need to do that. You don't need, and you're like, oh, fuck it, I'm going down the pub.
That really brought up a really good point, because a lot of times we don't do it for fear of what other people will think of us. Now, I'm thinking about you with what you've done, and maybe how people from your previous life in the Marines and the military would perceive you as being this kind of coach. Was there a lot of them that kind of gave you a bit of banter and you had to push?
So if I'm honest, when you leave the Marines, you actually lose touch with a lot of the guys. And this is the thing, is that it's your world when you're there, and then when you leave, you're out the picture, you're out the frame, you're just a number. I keep in touch with 1 or 2 guys, and actually the guys that I keep in touch with or I network with on social media are really, really positive about it.
Right.
Which is really nice to hear. And I'm glad you point out, because I'll be honest, when I started this, a lot of my self-doubt was that I wonder if I'm good enough to do this. I wonder, oh God, what if the guys that I used to work with see this? Do you know what I mean? And I used to really worry about what they used to think, because the guy that they knew was a complete and utter dick. Like, that if I'm being honest, if you go back to 2009 to 2011 when I finished, those couple of years, I was a complete dickhead. Yeah. Selfish, it was all about me. One of the lads, and a lot of there's a bigger, deeper story, is that I never got to do that as a lad. I was with my wife from when I was 15, 16 years old. So a lot of that was me reliving my life in 2 years, and it did not work, and I did not like that person, that version of myself. But that's stuff that I have to carry with me and deal with. But just like guys right now, they never think that the 50-year-old version of them is going to come. They never think that retirement's going to come. They never think about that future. That it's very much about the present right now. What is happening now? Oh, I'm all right now. You know, I'm managing to do this. I'm managing to do this. That's great. But what about 5 years from now? Because I'm a big believer, how you live your life now is going to be no different to how you live your life in 5 years. Unless you consciously put yourself at the top of the priority list rather than work, and then put yourself at the top. Because what happens right now is that people will say to you, oh, my priority is family, my priority is me, and then it's work. And actually their actions don't reflect that. Their priorities is work, family, and then you're last.
Yeah, and you can see it. You can definitely see it in people's reflections.
100%.
Spending their time, what they're doing, how they're living. So I think it'd be nice to touch on before we finish is your book, and you mentioned it earlier. It's a state of mind. I remember the adverts for the Royal Marines because I fraternized a little bit with them with the reservists, and it was 99.99% need not apply.
Yeah.
State of mind. And I've ordered your book. I actually just ordered it this morning.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
So you can get the book. It's a state of mind on Amazon. So I'd encourage anybody to go and do that. But if you could you talked a little bit about it, but just summarize what it's about, who it's for. Of
course.
And encourage people to go and get it.
Yeah, of course. So I really had a message to put out, and I just had all of these thoughts, and I was writing stuff down. I was like, why don't I just fucking write a book? I put all of this book together. I got some help about how to do it, and really the book was just an eye opener. But it's a guide. Like the thing with books is that when you read a book, most of the time you read a book and you'll probably get one or two things from it. And I just wanted to write something that was simple, that people could just literally understand without all of the jargon of, I'm not a life coach by any means of I'm a trainer. That's what I am. I'm just a dad. I'm a trainer that has a perception of like life and how people should be better and stuff. I'm trying to help. And when I read a lot of these books, they use fancy words, fancy jargon, and fancy paragraphs and sentences. And I ended up getting through a quarter of these books and thinking, this is like, how are people meant to improve themselves when they can't understand half of the words? And it's not that we're not educated. It's just that, we're just not that way inclined. We just need something that is simple, that is basic. So I decided to do the book, and it was meant to be simple with lots of eye openers. Just like I wanted lots of aha moments. So you're reading something through and go, that's me. Like that is what I do. And then you keep going through, that is what I do. And it's really just to put a little bit of perception on what life is about. It's to identify your areas, and I think that's the idea of the book. And it's just been picked up by Hodder, which is a really big publisher, because they really found it intriguing. And I never expected to sell any more than 50 books. I genuinely just put it out there, put it up on Amazon, and it sold, I think, nearly 6,500 copies.
Great.
And I was absolutely amazed. And the new publishers, we're doing an audio book for it. We've got a brand new front cover for it. And it's basically going worldwide, which is insane. And when I think about people who read this book and put it in and go, God, that's just really put into my, the thing where we talked about with the business guys of where's the first start? That book is the guide. Yeah. It's just self-awareness. It's perception. It's perspective of what life is, really what you're doing and what you want to be doing versus what you want to be doing. Yeah. We have a vision in our head what we want to do. But the thing is, we never really do it by ourselves. And the reason I do my coaching group is for people to go from that point where I offer so much free content, the book, podcast and stuff, to then suddenly me going, hey, Danny boy, why aren't you following up with what you said? How's it going? And suddenly you get accountability. So the book offers accountability as well. It offers structure. It offers vision. It offers some tips and guidance. And I think it's a really good starting point.
I think it's brilliant. It's Einstein said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't know it well enough.
100%.
You're speaking from experience, which I think is superb. It's not someone who's just written something trying to pretend to be something that they've not done. And I think it's fantastic. You're absolutely right. I have a bookshelf full of personal development books, 3/4 read. Very few I actually get to the end of. So I'd really encourage people to go and buy that. I think it's testament. What's really nice is as soon as you started speaking about that, your passion just threw straight out of you.
I know.
That's the reason you sold 6,500 copies and not 50 copies.
Yeah.
You are emotionally invested in it.
I love it. I love it. And I literally do love it. And you know, I love doing the content. I genuinely love doing the videos and the podcast. And sometimes I like being, the more controversial I can be, the more you trigger a reaction. And sometimes you have to trigger that reaction. Like there's a beast in every single one of us. There's a fire burning. And as we go through, like having a family, getting the mortgage, being stuck in the job that you didn't want to be in, that flame dimmers, it disappears. And then you're suddenly hitting 40 and you're going, now what, like, am I just going to work and rot away? Is this it? I mean, and it's a formula that I use. It's once you know your purpose, it drives the passion, which drives you full stop, and then you become obsessed. And my partner would tell you that I'm obsessed, and she has worked really hard with me for me to cut off in the evening.
Obsession is good. Like this. What bugs me, and I work with health, is this: people say obsession is unhealthy. It is not.
No.
As long as you're obsessed about your true purpose, which you've just spoken about, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant. Where else can people? Because you are on Instagram. You've got a website. Tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you.
Okay, so we're on Facebook on The Dad's Coach. Instagram is The Dad's Coach. YouTube is The Dad's Coach. I think LinkedIn is either James Boardman or The Dad's Coach.
Yeah.
Then there's the podcast on iTunes, which is a State of Mind podcast. That's on iTunes, Podbean, or Casterbox, or Castaway. I'm not sure which one that is. And then my website is boardmanjames.com.
Brilliant.
There's lots of free stuff there. I do a free 5-day Fire It Up challenge, which is a free 5 days of coaching. And it really looks at self-awareness, health, purpose, morning routines, and planning and structure, which I love taking as well. It's really good.
Brilliant. Well, I'd encourage anybody to check out your material. I'd encourage them to go and buy the book. And as soon as I've absorbed it on my trip this weekend, I'm going to do another podcast probably on reviewing that, which is brilliant. So go and check him out. Dad's Coach, James Boardman. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
People have really taken a lot away. The purpose of this show is to inspire those who inspire others, turn it around and inspire themselves. And you're doing that for a perfect niche of men who really, really need what it is you have to give. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
I look forward to following your journey as you move forward into the future.
Thanks, my man. Thanks for having me. Boom.
Great stuff, mate. Really enjoyed that.
It was good. That flew by.